Well, the Government of India has introduced the draft Indian Telecommunication Bill 2022 that aims for minimum but effective regulation of the sector.
Now, the proposed bill aims to bring sweeping changes to how the telecom sector is governed.
Now, the centre is planning to phase out the Indian Telegraph Act of 1885 with the new telecom bill, catering to the era of 5G, IoT and Industry 4.0.
The draft bill, which is up for public consumption, has raised some concerns. For instance, the bill proposes to bring messaging apps under licensing purview, provides powers to suspend internet services and makes KYC mandatory for user verification.
Hi everybody, on 21st of September 2022, the Government of India launched the Telecom Draft Bill 2022. And as soon as it was launched, there was a huge wave of outrage both from media and the stakeholders of the digital ecosystem of India. And trust me, it actually looks like a disaster. And the fun fact is that if this bill passes, the government might indirectly force you to pay for WhatsApp, FaceTime and Telegram. And more importantly, it will kill the progress of its very own vision of digital India. So in this episode today, let's do a deep dive and try to understand what is the Telecom Draft Bill 2022, why has it become such a big controversy, how did WhatsApp come into the picture, and most importantly, if executed the way it has been proposed, how will it affect the lives of ordinary people like you and me. So if you find this video helpful, please share it with as many people as possible to educate them about this important government policy. To understand the first segment of this controversy, we first have to understand the difference between carriage and content. The print actually gave out a very beautiful analogy by saying that carriage is the highway that allows you to go from one place to the other. And in the context of telecom, it's the telecommunication network that carries bytes from one machine to another. Whereas content is what rides on this carriage. It's like the truck that rides on the highway. So the message that you send to your friend on WhatsApp is the content that is being carried through the carrier, which is the internet. Similarly, Netflix creates and curates content and it uses the carriage, as in the internet, to bring it to your devices. And you pay for Netflix for the content and you pay Airtel for the internet, as in the carriage. Now, as we all saw in the 5G video, spectrum for the carriage in India is highly regulated. So not anyone can just stand up and say that I want to start a telecom company. They have to bid for it, purchase the spectrum, and only then they can even enter the business of telecommunication. Whereas, when it comes to content, the democratization of innovation has been absolutely crazy. So today, if a developer spots a particular problem, he or she can just build an app, put it out in the market and let the users use and pay for it. So the developer makes money and he or she is taxed accordingly. That's it. There is no need for the developer to ask for permission from Airtel, Jio or the government, isn't it? And this low barrier to entry is the sole reason why apps like Facebook, WhatsApp, Telegram and every other revolutionary app has been able to change the lives of billions of people all across the world. But guess what? Now, the very same government that talks about digital India and the need to encourage digitalization is putting a big hurdle for the most revolutionary services India has ever seen. In the draft bill, the government has included internet-based and OTT communication services such as WhatsApp calls, FaceTime and Google Meet under the definition of telecom services. And apparently, it's meant to bring a level playing field in the telecom space. Because today, while telecom companies need a license to offer services, OTT platforms do not need to go through those hurdles. So as per the draft law, any service made available through the internet will be under the central government's purview. So tomorrow, if you develop an app, this app will need a license from the government to operate. Now, do you realize what's going to happen with this? First of all, WhatsApp and FaceTime like apps might have to buy a 500-600 crore license. And where will they recover that money from? From people like you and me. And the worst part is that this is not because their operation has become costly, but because the government wants to level the playing field for Jio, Airtel and WhatsApp. Secondly, tomorrow, if you're a very talented developer who worked very hard to find a way to make calls more efficient, you cannot roll that app out because you will need a freaking license from the government to roll it out to your users. If this isn't killing innovation, I don't know what is. Now this begs the question, what is the government thinking with all these regulations? I mean, there has to be some sort of reasoning for this, isn't it? Well, as it turns out, the government states this reason to be national security. So if you're a licensed telecom service provider, today you must compulsorily provide access of your network to the law enforcement authorities so that they can intercept messages during the course of investigation. And apparently now, the digital communication apps have no obligation to share all this data with the law because they do not fall under the definition of licensed telecommunication service. So without this permission, because of the encryption, it becomes very difficult for the government to identify and punish criminals. This is the reason why the government wants to bring WhatsApp and FaceTime like apps under the license regime. Now the argument from experts over here is that if lawful interception is your issue, then the IT Act already has provisions to enable lawful interception and monitoring of messages that are sent through digital communication applications. So there is already a provision for that. But even then the government is putting for the argument of national security. Now whether this is good or bad, you let me know in the comments. And this brings us to the second segment of the bill, which is actually good for all of us. You remember guys, there was a time when you entered your mobile number in a website because you wanted to get access to a free course or PDF. Well, guess what? The moment you enter your mobile number, not only does that company's sales team call you, but also the sales team of a real estate company, a credit card company, and of course, the banks who are willing to give you loans for no freaking reason at all. You know why? Because these sweet people form a huge database of all the mobile numbers and they sell it to other companies who then give it to their sales team to irritate you. But you know what? Now, with the Telecom Draft Bill, this will be curtailed. Why? Because the draft bill proposes that the identity of the person communicating using any form of telecommunication service shall be available to the user receiving such communication. In simple words, this means that instead of we getting calls from a random phone number, now the name of the person would be displayed by default on your caller ID. And the best part is that this is not just applicable for voice calls, but also for the users of OTT communication services like WhatsApp and Signal. And if these people do not complete their identification, there'll be a 50,000 rupees fine, suspension of the mobile number, and even banning of the person from using these telecom services for a certain period of time. Now, if you haven't got it already, this is literally the killer of Truecaller in the Indian market. And the best part is that the draft bill also states that even advertising and promotional communication should be made only with the prior consent of a subscriber. So if all goes well, we can actually expect a life without these stupid spam calls and spam messages. And this brings us to the third segment, which is about the power of the center in dealing with spectrum and telecom companies. Now people, this is a little technical, so if you find it to be too heavy, please skip to this timestamp. Now here we have two major pointers. First of all, the Department of Telecommunication has proposed that if a telecom entity in possession of spectrum goes through bankruptcy or insolvency, the assigned spectrum will revert to the control of the center. So until now, there had been a lack of clarity on whether the spectrum owned by the defaulting operator must belong to the center or whether the banks can take control of it. Secondly, the draft bill gives the center the powers to defer, convert into equity, write off, or grant relief to any licensee under extraordinary circumstances, including financial stress, consumer interest, and maintaining competition. And if you know the state of Indian telecom industry, this could be a big benefit to Vodafone and Idea, and it could help the government keep more players in the industry. Now the only concern over here is that in the race of bailing out these companies, the government should not waste thousands of crores of taxpayers' money, and crony capitalism over here is a big threat. And lastly, we have the critical provision on internet shutdowns. And we all know when internet shutdowns happen, right?
Section 144 has been imposed in Amravati in the backdrop of back-to-back stone pelting incidents in the city. Internet services have been suspended in the city for 3 days following the violent protests.
बिहार के 12 जिलों में 19 जून तक बंद रहेगी इंटरनेट सेवा.
In Manipur, mobile data services have been suspended for 5 days across the state in an urgent order passed by the state government last night.
So for the first time in the Indian legal framework, a specific provision is actually enabling the government to order the suspension of internet power. However, the major concern over here is that in case of riots and chaos, the government should not use internet shutdown as the means to curb the voices of the victims. For example, tomorrow if riots pop up in Ranchi, if the government applies an internet shutdown, it should take equal measures and responsibility to apply stringent security to curb the violence and save the people. Or else, if this power is misused, the politicians can actually use internet shutdown to orchestrate a riot, and that will be very dangerous. And this brings us to the last part of the episode, and that is, as citizens of India, what are the most important pointers that you need to keep an eye on so that the government doesn't come out with a disastrous version of the telecom bill? But before we move on, I want to quickly thank our partners of this episode, and that is Smallcase. Smallcase is this wonderful company that helps you make the most strategic investments into the stock market. And they do that by making strategic baskets of hand-picked stocks in every sector. In this case, you can invest in the digital inclusion Smallcase. This small case consists of hand-picked stocks of those companies that will actually benefit because of the digital revolution of India. The best part is that the small case manager herself will rebalance the stocks with the changing market conditions. So that way, you can be rest assured about your investments no matter how the market swings. So if this sounds useful to you, go ahead and download the Smallcase app from the link in the description. Moving on, the first concern with Telecom Draft Bill is data privacy. In this case, the interception and sharing of user information with the government will weaken the end-to-end encryption that breaches our data privacy rights. Secondly, like I said, internet shutdown, if misused by the existing or the upcoming government, could prove as a security and economic disaster. So public safety is a big concern. And lastly, software and software services is one of the most important industries in India, and this industry solely relies on being able to operate in an environment that prizes innovation and is not choked by regulatory compliance. So regulation must not kill this engine of innovation. These are some of the most important segments of the bill that you as citizens of the country need to be aware of, so that you don't raise your voices after you bear the consequences of it. So whatever is your concern, use your Twitter handle, tag the following handles to voice your opinion and help the government redraft a better telecom bill. So if you find this video helpful, please share it with as many people as possible to educate them about this important government policy. That's all from my side for today, guys. I've attached the draft bill link in the description along with all the best articles that I could find. So do have a look at them and become an informed citizen of India. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube Baba happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.